Hi there. Remember in our previous session, I said, well, it's hard not to have faith when God picks you up literally and puts you somewhere else. Well, you think I was making that up? Let's see what happens in today's session. Okay, it said that Abram believed God and it was counted to him for righteousness. Wow. Even the faith came from God. I'll show you today that that is quite true. Now, you think Abram had all the faith to believe what God had told him. Let's start reading in verses 8 and go right through until verse 12 and see what really was going on in Abram's mind. And Abram said, Lord God, how shall I know that I shall inherit it? Does that sound like faith to you? I'll read this from the King James. And he said, Lord God, whereby shall I know that I shall inherit it? And God said to him, Take me a heifer of 3 years old, and a she goat of 3 years old, and a ram of 3 years old, and a turtle dove, and a young pigeon. So Abram took unto him all these, divided them in the middle, cut them right through in the middle, and laid each piece one against the other. But the birds did he not divide. So, and when the fowls came upon the carcasses, that's the vultures and the crows and ravens, and Abram drove them away. And when the sun was going down, a deep sleep fell upon Abram, and lo, a horror of great darkness fell upon him. Does that sound like faith? Abram believed God, and it was counted to him for righteousness. Wow. Now let's continue in today's lesson, and I will pick it apart and see what happens. Lord God, whereby shall I know that I shall inherit it? That's what Abram said. Notice Abram didn't ask about his future offspring or his descendants, but rather about the land he and his future generations would be given as an inheritance. God, in mentioning twice he'd have children, already settled it. But what about the land? Now, previously, didn't God include the land? Ah, well, Abram just wanted to make sure. You know, it's like when we check facts and then we double check just to make 100% sure. Well, that's what Abram was doing. You realize that? Now, in today's culture, a contract requires it be drawn up, right? You two people are to sign it and then signed by both parties. And in those days, right, a serious agreement was made and closed with a blood covenant. That means a sacrifice was made. The sacrifice meant I really, really mean it. It's like today when we play a joke, we say, cross my heart and hope to die. Well, no, they're not hoping to die, but that's where it came from. The animals were sacrificed and split in two, in half, and arranged to enable two people making a solemn contract to walk through the middle hand in hand to seal the agreement. This is as far as my knowledge of contract goes of that time. Remember, I don't know everything. I'm just trying to teach what I do know and share what I do know about the book of Genesis. Now, I'm totally at a loss as to why God gave specific details for the requirements of the 5 different kinds of clean animals suitable for sacrifice. There had to be a 3-year-old cow, a 3-year-old female goat, a 3-year-old ram, that's a male sheep, and the other 2 were a turtle dove and a young pigeon. According to verse 10, Abram cut the larger animals in half, and laying the halves one against the other on 2 sides, leaving a path between the halves. The turtle dove and the pigeon, however, were not split, one on one side and one on the other side. Now the waiting game. Now the waiting for the other party would start. Abram was already there, wasn't he? So now you see, it took 2 to have a contract, right? So Abram did the first part. Now, carrion-eating birds like vultures and ravens tried to pick at the sacrificed animals, but Abram kept driving them away. But the delay of God's appearance seemed to be too long. Do you know what that delay foreshadowed? The delay symbolically foreshadowed the considerable period which typically elapses before God's promises would be fulfilled in a believer's life. Do you sense that God promised you something? Well, sometimes there's a delay. Are you patient enough to wait upon God? Well, Abram was. And during that time of waiting, a believer would have to guard against the attacks of both the wicked people going against him with all that negativity and against the evil spirits that will seek to tear you down. Abram withstood that test. But now something remarkable happens. At sunset, God placed Abram under full anesthesia. That means he was completely knocked out. Now, why would that be? Next, we'll examine exactly why God did that to Abram, as Abram fell into a very deep sleep.